Okay, here we are back on, back on. James, under the Homeland Security industrial complex, is going after ISIS viewed as a source of profit. Oh, already. Already big profit from ISIS, right?
Yeah, well, I think
Pentagon.
What we have is 13 years of endless war. We've had since 9/11.
Right.
Basically, 9/11, after 9/11, we started with a search for justice. Now, 13 years later, the war on terror has kind of become a search for cash. And,
yeah.
And you know, we always find a new threat. I mean, granted, ISIS is serious, but we don't have to transform our whole society just because of every insurgent group around the world. And we have to begin to realize these groups, while they're dangerous, they're not existential threats to the United States. They're not reasons for us to allow a whole national security state to be developed.
You know who was right was, I mean, this guy, by the way, is a real hero to journalists.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Absolutely.
But you know, Eisenhower's military-industrial complex speech looks better and more important with every passing year. And that speech really should go in the canon as something we study.
Right.
And for him to do it as a general, he was the one guy who could warn us with real credibility, and it's only become more of a problem with time.
Right. That whole idea of the, you know, we could put that under the category of Nixon to China.
Yeah.
Of people who can do things that nobody else can do, or few other can do, because they have this sort of special credibility born of something they did.
Centrist leadership.
Why doesn't that work for guns? Reagan got shot. He could have said, hey, I have a bullet in me. Gabby Giffords, you know, she still says, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. What does it take to change us on the gun thing?
Well, Reagan supported the Brady Bill. I mean, Mary will remember this. And actually, when you raise that inconvenient fact to conservatives today, they get real pissed. But there it is, and in part because of his compassion and the experience of James Brady. So the fact that we can't get background checks, things that really had bipartisan support before, when you get 90% of the support of the American people, that's a sickness. And it's how members of the Congress are so goddamn scared of lobbyists that they'll run the other way despite 90% of the American people want something else.
There's actually a lot of things about St. Reagan, peace and blessings upon him, that... that
There you go.
but that are inconvenient truths.
Yeah.
Like he cut and run out of Lebanon. Like he was for amnesty. Like he wanted nuclear weapons down to zero.
So now you're done bashing Bush, so you're going to go back to Reagan.
I'm actually praising Reagan. I'm actually, these are the things I love about him. You know, but they're the ones that get swept under the rug, or the convenient rewriting of history.
You're right about the way he dealt with terrorism was much more realistic and pragmatic.
Right. Like, we're getting the fuck out of here.
Right.
Yeah. Although, I got to tell you.
That was his...
But I got to tell you, man.
True.
There is a real... When people got the message that you could hit Americans once in Lebanon with the barracks and they would retreat, that does send a message, and that does inspire a lot of ugly people who think they can intimidate us by attacking us. And that does create... That cycle got started, and people can argue, with Lebanon.
And
it would have been better if we had stayed in Lebanon?
That's the part of the problem with pretending you're an empire, not a republic.
But when you don't respond to that, or you respond in that way, and you cumulatively then don't respond to the East African embassy bombings, you don't respond to the USS Cole bombing, you don't respond to
we did respond.
The problem is, though, that if what we are now going down, we're going down the road that Israel is going down, which is to have a cycle of violence. You attack, we attack. We respond to every attack. And there is no end to that unless we have some clear, defined goals in the war on terror. And that's where we lack right now, is a clear endpoint. What are we trying to achieve?
Correct. Our end game now is don't do stupid stuff, I believe your candidate for the next presidential race said. I'm in agreement with you. Some situations, particularly foreign policy and national security, have to be managed. They can't be solved. This is a problem that's been going on millennia. And we go, because we're Americans, and there's no exclusive province to either party, we go to solution instead of management.
We did respond to the embassy bombings. Clinton sent a cruise missile and blew up a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan. So he was attacking the wrong country before it was cool.
Mary, care to respond?
Never interfere your enemy when he's in the process of destroying
That's right.
himself.
No, that was actually one for you. Democrats blame, Mary, this person says, blame the do-nothing Congress on the Republicans. What is the Republican rebuttal to that?
Well, the opposition party is to oppose, but I would also say something you probably don't know, Texter, that 370 pieces of bipartisan legislation were passed out of the House. Energy, immigration, tax reform. Sitting where?
Major pieces?
370, which a lot of major stuff was inside there.
Bipartisan.
Bipartisan, look it up. I don't make up stuff. I'm not Paul Krugman. This is true.
Okay, give me...
And Keystone Pipeline, reforms to ACA, corporate and individual tax reform.
These are bipartisan?
Bipartisan energy.
This is bipartisan, like the way it was when the Louisiana Republican voted for the ACA and Nancy Pelosi said it was bipartisan. This is not. I mean.
Okay, well.
I mean, yeah.
Let's see what happens when we take over the Senate and Harry Reid is not constipating this legislation. Let's see what gets done. I'm just getting in your vernacular.
I mean, the record we've seen, frankly, is that the only time anything gets done is when Boehner ditches the Hastert rule, which, by the way, is bullshit in the first place, because even Hastert says it wasn't a real thing. And every time the president actually tries to reach out, support erodes from positions that Republicans supported in the past, because he's considered politically toxic by Republicans to support something the president supports.
Democratic erosion at this point.
Yeah, we could talk about Southern Democrats and all that dynamic.
Here's a question I've asked also, so it's interesting to me. Does it really matter who wins the Senate next month? Won't there be a filibuster prevent anything from being done? I've asked that question. I asked her to think of Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I mean, there's not a filibuster in the House.
Depends what the makeup of the Senate.
No, the Senate.
Yeah.
If the makeup of the Senate is more of the same, in conjunction with the upcoming 2016 race, no, things will just stay in this gridlock. However, the founders divined gridlock. They want us to, when we're not in a consensus.
They didn't want this much.
There's a difference between compromise and consensus. Compromise is Solomon's baby, and you end up with an inferior product. If you get data-driven, outcome-based consensus, like they do at Google, like they do at Apple.
Mary, what are you talking about? No, listen. I mean, seriously, man. The country is based on principled compromise. The Constitution is based on principled compromise. We've had divided government a ton before, including in the 1990s. We always got a lot done. No, principle's there. The problem is compromise has become a dirty word. And you know, you want to look at where the bridge is going to get built. I mean, look at, you know, if Greg Orman, the independent from Kansas, gets elected, and Angus King, an independent from Maine, and all of a sudden you got a coalition of folks who can be the balance of power, maybe that'll restore some of the ability to build bipartisan bridges. But we have the least productive, least popular Congress in American history right now, and it's because they're so divided, they're totally dysfunctional. It's a break with American history. It's not a continuation of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, folks.